everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. We've got an exciting company in HighGold. HighGold has a resource on their property in Alaska, a quite substantial resource when you consider the grade. They've also got a new discovery and the potential for more in their Alaska project. And they've got a project in Timmins, Ontario. So I think collectively these give these guys a good runway of news flow. And I think that will help when gold gets stronger and they get some more good news out. How you doing, Darwin?
Oh, I'm doing great, Allan. Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially when you got news like you did yesterday. HighGold mining intersects 8.9 grams gold equivalent over 84.7 meters at the JT deposit. So this is where you've got the resource. Let's talk about it, Darwin.
Yeah. So, we had a couple of holes that were designed as dual purpose infill and to collect material for metallurgical testing. And so we released one of those holes a month and a half ago or so, and this was the second hole, and it was in the upper parts of the deposit, much closer to surface. And it was actually, we didn't have the density there that we needed or wanted, and we're glad we filled it in because we hit much wider widths or larger widths and much higher grade gold than we had in the two closest holes around it, which were actually drilled in 2019 in our inaugural campaign. So what that means is it's going to significantly both expand the envelope of that part of the deposit. That'll make it into resource, and the grade will be better because it was going into an area that was part of that existing resource. So it's all positive for the resource update that we're shooting to do in early 2022.
So if what I understand about this deposit is there's a potential that you could come in from the side with an adit, and would this be above any potential adit?
Yeah, we've got well above it. It's funny because the deepest parts are probably the parts you'd mine first because of the adit. You drift in and then which had some very high. I mean, this was a fantastic hole we released this week. 9 grams gold equivalent over 84 meters. I mean, that's a dandy of a hole. The one below it was 18 grams. The earlier one was at the very bottom. It had 18.7 grams per ton gold over better than almost 55 meters actually. Those aren't true widths. True widths are anywhere in the sort of closer to 40 meters, 40 to 50 meters for some of these intersections. But
nonetheless, really nice you start adding up 40 meters at a time of those kind of grades, and that's going to crank up your resource.
Totally. So when you think about it, it's a good mine that's decent grade, 5 to 10 grams, 4 meters, you're generally very happy with. You can build tons and ounces with time. That's a very good sort of mine environment. This is 10 times wider than that. So when you get that kind of width, you obviously you build your tons 10 times faster and your ounces 10 times faster. A 25 meter step out would be equivalent to 250 meter step out. So it's very meaningful. I mean, for some, it looks like while you're drilling into the existing resource, but both the better grade and that width are a really nice combo, particularly in this, the section where we drilled this hole that we released this week was, it was what, I don't know, the other holes were 15 to 30 meters drilled width. And so their true width was narrower and their grade was sort of 1.5 to 2.5 grams per ton gold. So this was actually, I think it was 4.7 grams gold, but had really nice base metals with it too. So we're more than double the gold grade and definitely more than double the actual total gold equivalent grade for
compared to the holes that were near it before.
Yeah. So there was 2 drilled this way. We came back across at it and had a lot better width. And then it shouldn't be a surprise because down dip is some really nice continuity of very wide zones of good grade. I think the down dip hole that was drilled, it's a historic hole drilled by the previous operators, was better than 90 meters of 5 or 7 grams. And there's another one on there of like 100 meters of 12 grams. I mean, you add these things up, it's just, it's beautiful, beautiful stuff.
Getting up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So with this release, we also had results from other step outs further along. And so, what happens when you drill these monsters here, it tends to overshadow the other hits that you have, but they're still very decent hits that are more conventional mine type widths and grades, not these, the truly outstanding stuff like we're seeing here in the guts of the deposit, but steadily building out tons and ounces and gold equivalent value as we march out to the northeast.
Yeah, you made a good quote, and I'll quote you, Darwin. You said, "We continue to be impressed by the strength of the mineralizing system at Johnson's Tract. Drill hole JT 21-134 is a prime example of the exceptional width and tenor of mineralization at JT, while drill hole JT 21-133, which was drilled approximately 400 meters down plunge of JT 21-134 and well outside the current resource, highlights both the continuity and spectrum of mineralization styles present at JT. We are looking forward to the results of the metallurgical test program, which will give us the first modern metal recoveries for the project in 25 years and will dovetail with the mineral resource update plan for early 2022. So there's a couple things that really stand out to me when I read that. One is I'm always looking for this power of a system that gives you the potential of the other thing, which was the continuity. So some pretty great stuff there in that comment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've now taken it from where, a long strike and sort of down plunge about 600 meters. And, when you actually stop and think about what 600 meters really is, it's a long distance. Like, if you're carrying parcels while you're Christmas shopping and had to go 600 meters, you'd be pretty tired by the end of it. So it's a long ways, and you're seeing that continuity throughout. And that's critical. One of the things that's characteristic of this deposit is it's quite variable in terms of whether you're into gold rich part of the system or copper rich part of the system or zinc rich part of the system. It's very, it's got continuity, but the metal grade variability, but it's all sort of mineable grade, whatever it is. So we're just as happy seeing base metals as we are precious metals. Key to us is seeing that continuity of the system down. And so these other holes that we released, they're 400 meters away from this infill hole that was way up at the top of the deposit. They're actually more than 200 meters outboard of the resource envelope. So we've got lots of resource that we can add that will get included. And then you go another 100 meters further out, it was a hole we released. It was actually our first hole released of the season. It was, it was 4 to 4.5 meters of about 20 grams gold equivalent with about 13 grams gold. So there's definitely still really good gold grade down deep in the system. It's just sometimes you hit more base metals, sometimes you hit more gold, depending on where you are. All of it, we expect, would be included in a future, reserve type, estimate once you get to that.
Okay, so let's help the audience visualize the envelope of the resource you have so far. What would be your that you've already released? What would be that envelope approximately?
Yeah, okay, so it's about 300 meters strike length and taken down depth about 275 to 300 meters. It's kind of that. And so we've basically more than doubled that envelope. We won't have doubled the size of the resource when we update it because we're not hitting 40, 50 meter true widths like we are in the main deposit down here. We're hitting, 4 to 10 to 15, type range widths. So they're narrower, but still very kind of conventional mineable widths and grades that you're seeing there. But we certainly expanded that system, more than doubled the footprint. It's been significant what we've done. So all of that will get incorporated into this upcoming resource, which we will do once we have all of the results in from all of the drilling. So, we'd like to think we'd have all of those back by late January. It might bleed into February. We will get the metallurgical work that we've launched on. We expect to get that, say, by mid-February, and all of that then will feed into an updated resource estimate.
And that will give you some ideas of the recovery of gold and the base metals.
Exactly. And we have a really good idea already because there was work done historically by good operators, good quality work. It's just old. And it behooves us to get modern work done. So we expect good gold recoveries and good base metal recoveries. But once you can tighten that up with new flotation test work, then it allows you to pick say a gold equivalent grade or an NSR type cutoff grade that you have more confidence in, right? You can have the real meaningful data, that is reliable data that allows you to more accurately define your cutoff grades.
Perfect. So that gives you a better confidence level in your resource calculation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's exactly right. So
now,
one of the things that was pretty neat about one of these deeper holes too is, like, let's say hole 133 that we reported, it had, it was broadly mineralized and silicified and altered throughout, probably over 200 meters. And we had within there areas that popped, but we saw full zonation of sort of more gold rich mineralization hit furthest up hole. Then we hit some really zinc and lead rich mineralization. And then we hit more of the footwall copper zone mineralization. So that's sort of some zoning that we see. And so it's almost like we're taking the ore body
that's VMS kind of zonation.
It is a little bit. Yeah. It's this oddball kind of hybrid epithermal VMS system. And so you do see some of those zonation patterns that are more commonly associated with VMS with what we're seeing.
Right, because you tend to get the silver or the zinc and the lead up higher in a VMS system, and then as you get closer to the heat source, you start kicking up copper, but then you got this gold element up where you should be seeing silver instead of gold.
No, I know. Yeah, so it's not a perfect fit, but in general, you see some of that zonation, and it's so what I like about that is it's telling you, like, all elements of the system are still alive down deep. When you get into the upper parts of the deposit, it's everything. I don't know if it's telescoped upon itself or why it's so thick there, but we haven't seen those thicknesses yet down deep. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't find them, and so for us, the key is that it's open. We've got good grades of all different styles, open down depth, and there should be lots more room to keep growing it.
Well, okay, so you guys had a couple maps that I wanted to talk about. Oh, darn it. Okay, so one was your first figure, and that will give investors a very good idea of how it's expanding. But the one I wanted to talk to you about is the second one, figure 2. And it looks like as you get to the depth that you got some complex faulting there. But the rock package that hosts the gold looks like it can extend beyond that faulting. So there's a couple things that popped to my mind there. Is one, that area of the complexity of the faulting, is kind of a very good conduit for bringing the fluids up. And secondly, that you can probably pick it up on the other side of that area where it looks like 3 faults are merging.
Yeah, no, that's sorry. I mean, do you want me to share that figure and talk to it a little bit, or?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, I think you can. Are you able to share screen?
Actually, it doesn't look like it. Looks like I'm disabled, but
here, maybe I can hold on. I'll see if I can enable your screen sharing here. It shouldn't be too difficult. Screen share, multiple participants. There you go. So you should be able to share now, Darwin.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see if I can find it now.
It's in your news release. On your website.
yeah. No, I had actually pulled up the figure, but it's not showing me that figure for some reason. I'll go to the news release itself.
Okay. Now, did you hit share screen as well?
Not yet. I figured I'd find it so you didn't have to suffer for me looking for it.
Yeah, it looks like you've got a couple that they come into a triangle and they meet, and then there's another triangle below, and then the one side of it comes through the one on the bottom.
Oh, I found it somewhere else here. Anyways, here we go. I did find it. Just had to show all windows. So yeah, you know, so I mean, this is a pretty compelling cross section when you look at it. You know, you actually look at all the hits here. So I'll first actually.
Well, yeah, let's talk about the hits. Those thick intersections. That's a hell of a good indicator of the power of the system and the potential to add to the resource.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
then
we have
you've got
better than 1,000 gram meter type intersections here, but you know, this is the one we released, hole 134 here, 84.7 meters of 4.7 gold, 4.5 zinc, some lead, some copper. There was a little bit of silver too, with some sub intervals that were quite high in gold itself. And you'll see as it's drilled across here, you know, this drilled width is probably, you know, true width is maybe 50–60% of the drilled width here, but you can see these other holes
JT
much narrower. The one just up dip here, 15 meters of 1.5 grams gold. This was 30 meters of 2.8 grams gold. And so when you realize all the resource blocks that would have been here before would have been defined by those holes, and now you've come through in the other direction to provide you better continuity and better control. Right. Now you're going to have better grade and better width of mineralization through that whole area. So that was a good value.
Plus, if you look at those two in context, 134 and 83, you know, it gives the potential to open that up quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you know, you go deeper here. I mean, this is, you know, there's some just beautiful widths and grades as you go deep here. You know, 97 meters of 5.9 grams gold with good zinc and copper credits was drilled below it. That actually came to here. Then there's another little subzone a little bit below that. What was this? This guy was 107 meters of 12 grams gold, 7% zinc. So it does seem to be getting richer as you get deeper in this particular area here. 71 meters at 20 grams gold. I mean, that's just outstanding, right? So, I mean, that's a really nice cross section. But speaking of your point on the faults, it is bound by a fault on this side, and in this particular case, this fault is not mineralized. There may be a little bit of mineralization that seems to be caught up in the fault itself, but it's it's got some width to it. It's got some gouge. It clearly is, you know, you go right through it into very high grade mineralization. So in this situation, while some of these faults may have been active when the deposit was forming, we can't really validate that. What we do know is they absolutely were active after mineralization. And so what that means, it's displaced some of the deposit. Those that have been following HighGold for a while know that that was a pretty key target for us in 2020, because we know that some portion of this deposit, which happens to be the highest grade and thickest portion, is getting offset by these faults. Last year,
not only offset, but it looks like your central gray area there, if you will, you got dark gray up top, light gray below. Yeah. But not only does it look like it offsets, but it looks like it expands as it offsets.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because just so you know, geologically here, this is the kind of favored dacite tuff horizon. It's where a lot of the gold likes to be. It's not exclusive. There's kind of a marker horizon here, this dark fine grain tuff down here. And then we get into another unit here. It's got quartzites. We call it a quartzite dacite. We see our footwall copper seems to like going down deeper into these lower stratigraphic layers. All this stratigraphy has been folded and wrapped up on end here, right? So it's when this deposit formed, all these layers would have been flatlined with things coming up into this key horizon. Right. We don't see what's above this horizon here because there's a quartz feldspar porphyry intrusive that comes in there, and in this case, it's also in fault contact. So we knew this has been displaced. The ore hasn't moved right here; it's moved somewhere. And we've yet to find where that's moved, but it is a key target for us in terms of what we're trying to track down. As we get deeper, the deposit actually pulls away from the fault, and you'll see in the second figure of this news release, the deposit mineralization has actually moved a little bit outboard from the fault. So it's, we're able to preserve a lot of this deposit. We're able to chase down plunge, and it's still there, but as it's come up plunge, and it just happens to be where some of the very best grade is, that fault is right adjacent to it. So there has to be some ore on the other side. We don't know how much, and we keep refining our model in terms of where it goes. We don't, it's not an essential part of the story to get this to critical mass, but obviously it'd be transformative if you hit that stuff on the other side.
Sure, because then you could, especially if it gets wider and keeps those grades going down there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, for sure. And so, I like to tell people geology is an iterative science. You come up with an idea, you put some holes, you go and map some. It kind of gives you new information that allows you to recalibrate your models and your exploration. And we're constantly testing our ideas. More often than not, we're wrong. It's just part of the reality of being a geologist, but that's what you do. And then every once in a while, you're right, and you feel like a hero. So, and it's worth it, because the prize is certainly worth chasing.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about that kind of grade in a resource. I mean, there's just not a lot of 10-gram resources out there these days.
No, there's not. And the ones that are 10-gram resources, there's not a lot that have this kind of width.
They're small.
1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter wide. So it is pretty special in our view. And obviously, as we're chasing this down plunge, we would be way happier if we kept seeing 40-meter true widths. If you had this grade and this width, that envelope that we have there, I mean, you'd probably be a 3 million ounce deposit by now, but we're not there. We're growing it a little more slowly, but it's still a damn nice deposit, and it's got a lot more growth to grow. And it's still quite early days in our view in terms of expanding.
Well, and if that dacitic tuff and the sediments can open up, and you've got such indications of such a powerful mineralizing system, that leads to some pretty big arm waving.
No, for sure. And one of the things we really like about this too is we're seeing these same geologic units that appear to have a control on the mineralization. Well, we know they do here. We're seeing the same things at Difficult Creek 4 kilometers away, right?
Wow.
And what else is there between here and 4 kilometers away? And even within this immediate environment, what's a long trend? As you know very well, Allan, VMS related systems and even epithermal systems will often have multiple sort of upflow kind of areas, or clustering, if you will, of deposits. So we think we're in that setting. This is obviously a tremendous start with what we have here. We're going to keep focusing on finding more.
Awesome. Well, it sure shows the potential to have a bigger resource, and you've got some big arm waving potential below that faulting area.
Yep. No, for sure. It's it's an area where we've been learning a lot, and it's an area that we keep revising our ideas. It's been some expensive drilling to test some of those targets, because we were drilling some deep holes in the past, but it's actually not dropped down as far as we thought originally. So I'll leave it there without trying to predict too much at this point in time, but it is part of the story.
Let me do the arm waving.
There you go. Perfect.
Well, okay, there's one thing to be able to arm wave. The second thing is how do you target that arm waving and that's what you got. This has probably been your best year of going to school on this deposit to learn. So next year's drilling, when you expand on this, you should be able to get into that arm waving area with a little more predictability.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got different types of arm waving on where we are on the property too. There's a lot of different elements going on, because it is such a big property with so many prospects around, that there's a lot of very compelling things. And
my gosh,
it's a really fun one to be working.
That package of rock that you're seeing 4 kilometers away and getting high grade in that just opens from point to point up. No,
for sure. And there's and one of the simple adages, right, like the most basic premises in our business, looking next to old head frames is a good place to find more gold. And we don't have a head frame here, but we do have a very nice deposit, and we think there's very high odds of more.
Well, we'll say in this case, looking for new zones, finding new zones, looking where there is some big zones. That's may not have a head frame, but you certainly got the truth machine working nicely.
Well, that's right. I mean, and as you know, and the scale of the alteration systems we see, we do have some really good like drone imagery to help people see that. Like, and it's one of the real values of coming to site. If there's site visits, guys come away with just the you know, it's hard to not be impressed by the scale of the alteration system and the length of the alteration systems here. And now we're getting more and more chemistry, surface chemistry, and you know, we'll have some news on some more surface work that we've done. It's obviously not as impactful to the share prices as
there
drill
again,
holes, but
that big alteration area is suggestive of a big system. Everything points back to a big, long-lived system.
yeah, and the kind of grades we're seeing at areas. So DC, you know, we've that earlier hole this year, 6.4 meters of better than 500 grams per ton gold with plus 2,000 grams per ton silver. Like those, you know, when you're having that 4 kilometers away from this, it's a good place to be looking.
In the same kind of rock.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so where do we stand on pending from Alaska?
So I think we've got about another 25. So we drilled 44 holes total. We've got about another 25 to come. We issue them in batches right now. You'll see this was the next batch of 10 from JT. I'm not entirely sure yet what will come next, whether it's DC or more JT, but we have, I think, another 10 holes from DC. We've got a couple from Kona, and the rest are from the JT area. Some were drilled along strike the other way. Some were testing this sort of high-grade boulders that we were just real shallow, a bunch of little shallow penetrations to try and track down the source of some high-grade boulders that were upslope from the deposit, and then some other ones that are further to the northeast. So we got to.
So there again, you're learning more and more about DCJT, the similarities of the rock, the alteration, and I still can't wait to see that the drilling from that big geophysical target.
Yeah, Kona there. Yeah. So that's a pretty interesting one. There's no doubt. So yeah, so stay tuned. Like we got results from that, all of that to come. You know, I mean, I don't think we'll put anything out now that we're rolling into Christmas and New Year's until we get a little bit into the new year. And quite frankly, we're still waiting on a lot of results.
So January, February, you should have good news flow on assays, and then you're working on your metallurgical work, updating your resource. So this Alaska project has months worth of news flow. I would think it
does. Yeah, no, for sure. It does. Yeah. I would say right up until late March. And then your sites will be on the coming drill program, which won't be very, very far in the distance. In the meantime, I would expect we'll start to see some results from Ontario roll in by sometime late February, maybe, or mid-February. I'm not too sure, but you know, we had a very efficient drill program up there. We went out there planning a minimum 3,000 meters. We completed about 4,300 meters in 5 weeks with one drill. Great efficiency, and really happy with what we've seen there. We'll wait on those results.
I'm very enthusiastic about that project. The rock you told me about, where there was historical mining in a small package, you know, that's like Red Lake kind of jewelry box stuff. And, you know, looking for more jewelry boxes where there's already one is usually turns out pretty good.
Well, for sure. It's a good place to be looking. So we'll be back there drilling by late January. We haven't defined the scale of that program yet, but I imagine it'll be somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 meters. We'll see. Yeah, we got a big IP crew doing work out there right now. You know, we've flown airborne, we've flown lidar, we've had a structurals guy do a bunch of work there. So there's in January. So what we just completed drilling was 2 specific vein targets that had a bunch of surface work, but very, very limited past drilling that were actually not very far from the historic Croesus mine itself. What we'll be testing in the new year, we'll be probably continuing on some of those in all probability, but also testing other conceptual targets and other historic showings that are in the new area that we assembled. So lots to be chasing. Should be fun.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody's really expecting much from that except for me and you. Well, it's all, I mean, the sign that you guys are optimistic is the fact that, you know, you're more than doubling your planned drilling in the next program, and you're probably going to be starting that before you even start to see your first set of assays.
Yeah, no, we will for sure. Yeah,
So
I mean,
obviously you like what you're seeing.
yeah, we do, and you know, it's great hunting grounds, and it's it's kind of like the Wayne Gretzky kind of line. You're not going to score if you don't get any shots on net. You get
And go to where the puck is going, not
and
where.
go to where the puck is going. And in my view here, it's like you got to drill. You got to get out there and drill. You're not going to find ore deposits unless you're drilling. And we definitely, that's part of our psyche, is to put the dollars we have in the ground and make discoveries. And it's really good hunting ground out there.
Okay, so let's close it off. Let's talk a little bit about the boring stuff that nobody likes to hear about, which is permits and working with the locals. Let's start first with Timmins, because you guys had some good news out with the local First Nations in the Timmins area. And let's start with that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for bringing that up, because certainly our relationship with local communities is integral to how we operate. As you know, we've got a special relationship in Alaska with the lands we have there that we lease from a native corporation. In Timmins, it operates a little bit differently, but there are, in the projects that we have within the greater Timmins region, we are within the traditional territories of 3 First Nations, and we now have exploration agreements with all 3. The most recent one was with Wagashig. They're not too far from where the Munro Croesus project is, and we have history with all of them before from the company that we were spun out of. But it's nice to formalize that, and we intend to use the local business, native owned businesses where we can. It's just good business, right? So
it's always been my, being First Nations myself, I'm kind of unique in the mining business, and I've been able to go into a couple areas that were known as difficult areas to get permits, and we didn't have any problems. And I think, the key thing is respect and consultation, meaningful consultation, and inclusion. So the more you can use the local people to get jobs, and I think that, Timmins, they've all worked with the mining business companies quite extensively. So it's good to get a green light, if you will, from the local First Nations.
Yeah, no, it's critical, in our view, and it's actually quite handy too. I mean, you've got snow plowing to do. Okay, the guys are just down the road. They come do your snow plowing. You got trenching and power washing to do. You got a skilled workforce right at hand, and you can keep
even for prospecting. Darwin, I had one of my grandfathers. He did a trap line for decades, and if you asked him, well, did you ever see a piece of rock like this? Right. He would be able to take you exactly to that point. And I really don't think a lot of the First Nations youth realize that they have those skills, and that they're promoted inside the mining business. They can be phenomenally good prospectors.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. Yeah, the power of observation, and it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. And so, okay, so now Alaska, I think sometimes people just throw things out because they've seen it in other parts where there was difficulty, and they know that there's a park in your area. But tell the people again, I might have to keep hammering this home to get the point across, but you guys have a very unique situation in your partnership with the local First Nations in Alaska, and how that park was cut out, and what you've been left with to develop your project.
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, just up the front, like, we're in this business, and I think, as you know, Allan, and a lot of people, there's this misperception about mining industry guys not being environmentalists at heart, we all really respect the land where we operate. We want to leave it in a better place than
we spend
it
our
was
lives
before.
on the ground, I mean, trying to understand Earth.
Yeah. So, but speaking specifically to your question, just a little bit of context, Alaska is unique in terms of how it settled its native land claims. It was done about 50 years ago, very unique, very progressive, and really a fantastic model in my view. And what they did is they created corporate entities that were for profit, that were owned by the Indigenous, with the shareholders being the Indigenous people that lived in the surrounding region. There's 12 of these regional corporate entities that own land-based regional corporate entities that were then able to select lands. They selected collectively about 10% of the landmass of Alaska, and they primarily selected lands for their resource potential, whether it was oil and gas, mineral, timber. So in this case, this area was selected for its mineral potential, specifically for its mineral potential. Subsequent to the selection, there was a park creation process that they participated in and basically willingly gave up, relinquished some of their land selections to allow the creation of the park. It's called Lake Clark National Park, which, I think was to everyone's benefit. It was, it's a pretty special area. But with the condition being, they were able to maintain this tract of land, this mineral potential, and with that, a road and port easement right. And these were actually written into law through a federal act of Congress, kind of coincident with the creation of the park. Does that give you a free pass for mining? No. But does it establish that mining is definitely, from a federal and state level, part of what's expected within this area? Yeah, from a land use management standpoint, from I think a broad political support standpoint, everyone understands that these lands were selected ultimately to provide revenue to the Indigenous people in the surrounding areas. And doesn't mean everyone's going to be 100% on side. It never is. I don't think you can get unanimous consent for anything these days, but we think it does. There's a lot to like about it from our side. That's the way we come at it. It should be a scenario where people feel good about it, coupled with the fact of what we've defined today. It looks like the kind of mine most people would like. They're small scale. And from a natural resources standpoint, other natural resources, whether it's fish or wildlife and that sort of things, you always need to be very sensitive to it. While there are, fish in virtually every stream in Alaska, this is not a major commercial salmon fishing area. There's some bear viewing that happens. And, I think some of these things are very easy to mitigate, and we don't see a fundamental issue, and we're here to connect and listen to the stakeholders and hear what their concerns are as well. So
and
longer answer than you wanted, probably. But.
One of the three pillars that I always talk about in dealing with First Nations communities is respect, consultation, and inclusion. And on the inclusion side, that corporation will be a participant in a mine if there is one there.
Yeah, which is really unique, actually. So, not totally unique. You see it in Alaska. There's a couple other projects where there is a back-in right where the Native Corps can actually earn a participating interest in the mine itself. So our deal, there's lease payments, and there would be royalties, which aren't dissimilar from government, royalties in some regimes. In this case, it's would be net smelter return type royalties on the precious and base metals that would be produced. But there's also ability to back into the project, where they would say get up to anywhere up to 25%. They would actually have to fund it would be at a mine production decision. So mine build, CIRI would then have to fund that portion of the mine build to earn in. But it's at their election. They can choose to, or they can choose not to. And it's either way, I think it works well for us. When
you've got to cut the pie like that, it always helps when you're looking at something that could be a high margin operation.
Yes.
But that doesn't put a lot of pressure on the bottom line.
No, no, and it's what I find fascinating too is I think when people you look around the world today, like a lot of the in African countries right now, you will see that there's something similar with the governments in those scenarios. Like in a lot of African countries, whether it's the tax regime or it's some sort of actual direct interest in the projects and things. So it's from a global standpoint that it's from an economic standpoint.
It's
There's
the way
not a big,
things are going.
yeah, in a way, yeah, and it's we're very happy with it. We think they're great partners, and it's a win-win scenario.
Well, my hope is you guys have a mine and they become your partners, and it becomes a model for other areas to look at.
For sure, for sure, it works well.
Awesome.
All right, man. So
okay,
anything else?
Let me wrap it up, Darwin. We've covered everything we need to. If you have to run, it's fine too.
Oh, that sounds good. Wrapping it up sounds great.
All right, folks. So there you go. HighGold has two really great projects. Even on their one project in Alaska, it has the potential to have more than one good situation on that project. They've got the JT zone or deposit that they're looking to expand that resource. And it's a high grade resource, 10 gram kind of grade, which there's not a lot of those around. Plus 4 kilometers away, they're hitting high grade in the same kind of rock. They've also got a very nice geophysical target that I'm quite excited to see. They drilled a couple holes into that. I'm excited to see that. Then they got the stuff in Timmins. All together, I think that this is a hell of a group of projects. And I think the company is undervalued relative to those just on the resource alone. So take a look at them. My shows are always for information purposes only. Speak with your financial advisors, do your homework, and I think you'll be impressed. On that note, have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.